All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the Hudson Media Group studio in North Bergen, and this is the final Hoboken Council debate, and this is featuring our incumbent in the 3rd Ward, Councilman Mike Russo, and challenger Ron Bautista. Guys, thanks for joining us today, and we want to give you each a moment, 1 minute to be exact, to introduce yourselves to the audience. So, Councilman, we could start with you.
Thank you, John, and I appreciate you having the debate here today. My name is Dr. Michael Russo. I am currently the 3rd Ward Councilman in the City of Hoboken. I've been serving the residents of that ward. A lot of things that have been accomplished just over the last year, making sure that our city is safe, making sure that the ward has had an increase in quality of life with things such as just paving our streets and making sure we have garbage cans on our corners. Things that we've done in the city as far as our open space, we have been able to quadruple the amount of open space in the city of Hoboken, specifically in the 3rd Ward. That has not been done in years prior to my being on the council. So we've done a lot and we'll continue to do a lot. And again, it's just something that I think we need to concentrate on to make sure that we continue down that path and make sure that our city is safe and very much in a large quality of life for our residents. So thanks again for having us, and I'm looking forward to today's debate.
All right, very good. Ron, what do you think?
Yes, my name is Ron Bautista. I'm running for 3rd Ward City Council. I've been living in Hoboken for the past 20 years. I've been an advisor for transit solutions for the Staten Island Economic Development Corporation. I've been an advisor for the New York State Department of State in how to connect better the government with the community. And I'm running for office because I would like to see a city that works for all ages and abilities. And with that, we have to have in mind that in the past 5 years, we've had more than 375 injuries because of car crashes in our streets in Hoboken. And also we live in one of the counties with the highest children asthma conditions caused by traffic fumes. And I believe that we have to address it with a higher urgency. We've had 15 years with the same councilman, and I believe it's time to change gears. So I hope that after today, you'll be able to assess both our positions and vote Bautista for City Council.
Thanks, Ron. Okay, guys, so obviously there's a few ones that I think you could see coming from a mile away. Let's start with the bike lanes. Let's get this out of the way, right? So we could start with Ron on this one. So if elected to the 3rd Ward seat, what would you do to ensure pedestrian safety in bike lanes, and how would you do this process and ensure that it doesn't become a burden to the taxpayer?
Yeah, so I believe that one of the biggest ways to solve the safety issues in our streets is to arrange it in a way that engineers have bringing up as solutions. We have streets that are wide enough. What I always tell people is if there's space for double parking, then there's space for a protected bike lane. And it's something that we can expand in a fast way, in a cost-effective way. They've done so in Jersey City, and they've done so in many cities across the world, including Bogota, Colombia, which is one of the models in how do you expand those type of networks. But it's something that works here in Hoboken because people are already biking. Nothing's going to change in terms of biking. Nothing's going to change in terms of people driving. I mean, if we bring better solutions, yes, some people will choose the other solutions that are traffic free. But I do believe that there is a way that we can coexist. Right now, cars have about 80% of the street. And I think that we can distribute it a bit more fair with other means of transportation, especially with our pedestrians in the sidewalks.
Thank you. And Councilman, what do you think on this one?
Well, it's a big topic in the city of Hoboken, and I've been reaching out to my constituency, asking them what their opinions are on this, and I've been doing that for years in the city. The reality is that the protected bike lanes in the city of Hoboken they're absolutely wanted, but they're wanted in a way where it makes sense for everybody. A lot of times what we have in the city of Hoboken is that one mode of transportation becomes the enemy of another mode of transportation. And we can't look at it from that perspective. We need to look at the city in its totality, right? So there are certain streets in the city of Hoboken that just do not warrant a protected bike lane. They're not big enough. Or they may be, like on Clinton Street, it may be a major thoroughfare where we have bus routes, we have emergency vehicles coming through, and that is not necessarily the best place for it. I think the city has to look at the entire roadway map in the city, so that we could really have a northbound and a southbound protected bike lane, and then expand that as we go through it, and do that the same for east and westbound. But right now, we're kind of looking at it in piecemeal, and I don't think that does a service to anybody. So we need to most certainly look at it from that totality perspective. But just to make sure,
time.
I'm sorry?
That's time. But I'm sure there's rebuttal, so
Sure,
please.
not a problem.
Yeah, so part of the rebuttal is, we've waited 15 years for us to take a more aggressive way of building our city and our infrastructure so that people can be safe, walking, crossing the street on 9th and Monroe Street, on 8th, on 7th, on 5th, on 6th. I mean, all these intersections have been intersections where cars are driving down very fast. And it has been proven through engineering that when you narrow down to 11 feet the travel lanes for cars, that helps into making sure that they're not going too fast, and that could save lives. I mean, there was, and I believe that we have to take on this means of transportation very seriously. There are ways that engineers have already built solutions for having a bus lane or a bus route with a protected bike lane. So I don't think that's an issue.
So just, I'm glad some certain points were brought up. The reality is, over my tenure as city councilman, I have voted for the first protected bike lane in the city of Hoboken, and voted for every bike lane in the city of Hoboken. I also voted for pedestrian safety measures such as bump outs and traffic calming measures. The reality of what my opponent keeps saying about the accidents in the city of Hoboken, what he fails to mention is that according to the police department, there has not been one major auto accident in the 3rd Ward over the last 3 years. I went and I did that research. They don't report any major accidents there. So I think the things that I was able to implement as a councilman are actually working, and I'll continue to do so for the city.
Thank you. So we're going to stay on a related topic. So, of course, it wouldn't be much of a debate if we weren't talking about e-scooters, right? So, obviously, you guys are well aware that on November 20th, this pilot program's over. Certainly, we've heard about the problems of the waterfronts and the parks. Recently, we've seen Hoboken PD enforcing drunken driving for a handful of people on these scooters. So, once November 20th comes and goes, if elected, what do you guys plan to do, if elected, in relation to this program? And we'll start with Councilman Russo.
Yeah, so this has been a major issue in the city, as everyone knows. The reality is there's about 54% of the city that are not 100% in favor of the e-scooters as it stands right now. There's a portion of that number that actually want to see major changes implemented. Some of those changes have been brought up before the city council, and we voted on those to make sure that we're protecting our citizenry. One of the things that I will initiate in our next meeting after Election Day is to remove all the e-scooters from the sidewalks. So we have a potential of tripping hazards, we have potential of liability from homeowners. All those things would be totally eliminated if we just take the scooters off the sidewalk, put them into the street. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by enforcement, and we do that by finding not only the rider, but finding the company as well. And that's an initiative that I'm pushing forward now.
Thank you. And Ron?
Yeah, I think that we have to adopt some of the ideas that we had from Ojo. So Ojo had a $35 fee if you didn't put the scooter in the designated area. So I think that we can do that. There are areas that we need clear right by the corner by the crosswalks, so that there's visibility both for the drivers and for the pedestrians. Those are areas that right now have bike racks for the bike share systems, and these are areas that could be designated for this type of scooters so that we get them off the sidewalks. There are also ways to make it safer by implementing something that Lime had proposed with their new era scooters, which was to have a camera that they could see how the scooter rider was riding. And if we're able to check and make sure that they are riding a certain way, then that helps everyone. There are initiatives that have worked. For example, stopping the service during, there was the Halloween different parties that were happening this past weekend, and by preventing the use of the scooters, it helped. I think that we have never been as rigorous as with other systems of transportation.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Just quickly, I'm glad my opponent agrees with a lot of the initiatives I was able to push forward with Lime. So we were able to incorporate some of the slowdown areas. We were able to use some geofencing technology. That's absolutely not where it needs to be. But those are the things that we're pushing forward to make sure that our citizenry is protected as possible, and we'll continue to do that. I meet with Lime on at least a biweekly basis at this point to discuss what the future plans are going to be. So we'll continue to do that and make sure Hoboken is safe.
Ron, anything else?
Yeah, I think that something that the Councilman Russo fails to say is that he first was for the scooters, then he's against the scooters, now he wants to work with the scooters. We have to have that proactive conversation on how do we improve the system, not just shut down the door and say that we're not going to have scooters after November. And also something about the crashes in the ward. Fifth and Monroe is still our ward, and not too long ago there was a nanny that was hit while she was pushing a double stroller by a car. So pedestrian safety is still a big issue in our ward, and it's something that has to be addressed and hasn't been addressed in many of our streets.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about responsible development. And obviously, this is something that we hear from residents throughout the Mile Square City. You know, some concerns about some of these skyscrapers and other large buildings that are going up. And of course, the big project is the Hoboken Rail Yard Redevelopment Plan. Obviously, it's not in the third ward, but I think just about anybody that's paying attention has an opinion on this. So if this were to go before the council, let's just say the November 6th meeting, even though it's not going to be that day, but hypothetically, where would you stand on this issue and why? And we'll start with Ron this time.
Yes, I would like more transparency on this type of project. There was a reduction on the open space. There was a rush also on having those conversations with the community and incorporating that. I don't believe there has been more conversations with the community because of election time. So I do think that we have to make sure that this is a project that's transit oriented, because or else it would cause higher car traffic into our area that is already congested because of the entrance of our city. And I will look forward to working and collaborating on this issue with all the other councilmen to make sure that this project is at scale and that it provides the community with the needs that it needs.
Thank you. Councilman?
Yeah, so anybody who has been paying attention knows that this project has been in the works for years, decades even. So there's been a lot of discussion through all of the iterations of what it potentially may have been. We had a major change in this project because we're making sure that our city becomes resilient. It was amazing today. We had the governor come into Hoboken and sign an executive order speaking specifically about our environment and global warming and how we're going to combat that, not only from a local perspective, but through the state as well. And that's how this project changed to what it currently is being proposed. We have had open meetings. We will continue to have open meetings. We will bring that back for a first reading. It will go before the planning board again, and then it will come back to the city council in its most current form. So we've been talking about this project for a really long time, and I would just hope that everyone understands that those meetings have happened and those changes have been talked about and those meetings have happened throughout the community and they will continue to happen.
Anything else on this, Ron? Okay. So obviously, when we're talking responsible development, something that comes up every so often is tax abatements and pilot agreements. Of course, the Third Ward Church Tower is one of the most long-standing, I believe, on the books to have a pilot agreement. I think that expires in less than a calendar year, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure that's going to come in front of the council in 2020 at some point. So in the event that you're elected, how do you think is the most responsible way to handle this pilot agreement, you know, assuming that is the direction that the city decides to move in, but that has been the trend up to this point? And we'll start with Councilman Russo.
Sure, and just to make sure we have it correctly, I do believe the pilot actually expired already. So the pilot in that specific instance, but this is a broader question. And what we've had in the city of Hoboken, as these pilots have come offline, we've had a mass amount of units being brought up to market rent, and we've had a mass amount of people leave the city of Hoboken. We can't allow that, right? It's our responsibility as leaders of the city of Hoboken to make sure we house all of our residents, whether that's the lowest of the socioeconomic scale to the highest of the socioeconomic scale. So how do we do that? We continue to build affordable housing in the city of Hoboken, and not just for low to moderate income, but to moderate to upper incomes as well. We need that entire scale so that as people do a little bit better in their livelihoods, they can walk that ladder and move from a lower income or an affordable unit to a moderate income or a workforce unit, and then to a market rate unit in the city of Hoboken. And what we always forget is that middle step. And that's why we have the problem that we have today when it comes to our affordability in the city of Hoboken.
All right, Rob?
Yeah, well, something that I'm proposing is to have a community land trust in Hoboken, and I'm glad that my opponent has adopted that as one of his positions as well. In the past month, I've received your mailers, Councilman. And I do think that this is a way to have, that we should have worked for many years now on developing this initiative, because that helps making properties permanently affordable. And then we don't come into issues of the expiring of pilots and then bringing up market rate units into the mix. I mean, I've met with people who are senior citizens that are on a fixed income, and I have a mom that she's 66 years old. She's soon to retire, and the income that she's going to get from her retirement is not going to be that high. And these are people who have lived many years in Hoboken, if not all their lives. I do believe that we have to work collaboratively on building this community land trust and make sure that we look out for them now and for however long they want to live in Hoboken.
Very good.
So just quickly, my record's clear. It's been clear. My positions are very vocal. Everyone knows where I stand on things. And it's funny because 2 years ago when my opponent was running for mayor, living up in the 2nd Ward, we didn't hear anything about a community land trust. We hear about it now because it's election time and everybody wants to get their talking points out. But the reality is I've been working for affordability in the city of Hoboken since the day I was elected. I will continue to do that now and into the future no matter what.
Rob?
Yes, the good thing about the internet is that I got receipts. And I did speak about community land trust 2 years ago when I ran for mayor. That was actually something I learned from Fair Rents Hoboken organization. Something I did not know about, but I learned it, and I started pushing for it since 2 years ago, and I've been talking about it ever since, meeting with different institutions that had that experience, even financial institutions that have worked on developing this type of projects, especially in New York City, and it's something that I'm looking forward to working for the community on this.
You guys got me grinning a little bit. We're starting to have some fun now. All right, so we're going to stick with affordable housing. Let me give you a broad one. So if elected to the 3rd Ward, I mean, obviously you're only one voice out of 9, but what do you think you could do as one council representative to preserve and to help actually perhaps expand affordable housing? Ron?
Yeah, well, part of the initiative is to make sure that the city reflects on its budget, also how much we appreciate mixed income families living in Hoboken. That means being proactive as a city to make sure that our tenants know what the fair price for their unit should be. Also promoting the community land trust as well. Yes, we do have only one vote as the 3rd Ward, but something that it's not only about votes. It's about activism. It's about pushing for the agenda. It's about talking to people about this type of initiatives, and also building those coalitions and that support that will push the needle so that other members of the city council see this as an opportunity to improve our neighborhoods.
Okay.
So the reality is the question is not really so much about affordable housing, but really about how to get things done as an elected official. And the reality that we see as the representative of the 3rd Ward through the years, I've been able to do that through multiple administrations. I've been able to do that without the political support of most of those administrations. So just in the last year, with our current administration, I've been able to renovate Madison Street Park within months of the new administration coming into office. I've been able to quadruple the open space in the city in the 3rd Ward, specifically in Hoboken. I've been able to pave almost the entire ward, almost every street in the city. I've been able to implement pedestrian safety measures in the form of bump outs, in the form of different traffic safety measures, in the form of different roadway services, and we'll continue to do that throughout the city and throughout the ward when I'm reelected to the city council.
Sure.
Yeah, so one of the issues with the way that the councilman approaches this type of initiatives is, for example, when there was a meeting at the Jubilee Center and a woman stood up and said, what are these blocks of concrete that are by the corners? What is this? The councilman just shrugged and was kind of like, I don't know, ask the mayor. And it was a meeting with the mayor, and I believe that we need more advocacy, because when people understand what are the reasons of why we do things in the city, it's easier for them to understand and to welcome these different changes that are for pedestrian safety and that help everyone.
Councilman?
I don't even know what my opponent is talking about at a meeting in the Jubilee Center. We've had thousands of meetings at the Jubilee Center for thousands of different things in the city of Hoboken pertaining to pedestrian safety and traffic and development in the ward. The reality is, out of most of them, I don't remember my opponent being at many of them.
Very good. So let me once again move us on to a different subject here. So I think this is a fun one for you guys. So obviously you're both running as independents, but Mayor Bala's team has taken this quote-unquote voter integrity pledge, where they're claiming that they will not do any sort of campaign canvassing at the housing authority buildings, and that they also will not pay any workers on election day. And the reason they cited for doing this is because of the recent arrest pertaining to vote by mail fraud, most notably Frank Rea in 2013, and there's been others in connection to the 2015 race. So where do you guys stand on this issue? And we'll start with you, Councilman.
Yeah, I think you do yourself a disservice for not using whatever means necessary to make sure your campaign is working at its fullest potential. We pay employees to do that. We pay consultants to draw up our mail. We pay mail houses to make sure our mail gets out. Why would you limit yourself to have boots on the ground on election day? And why would you, as an elected official or someone seeking that office, limit yourself in speaking to your constituency? It just doesn't make sense to me. Now, having said all of that, we need to make sure that our integrity is as pure as possible, make sure we're doing everything the right way, make sure that we instruct our employees when it comes to a campaign to do exactly what they need to do by law and without stepping over that line. So I think it's two different questions, but the reality is I would never want to hinder a campaign by saying I'm not going to employ someone for that campaign, because ultimately we're trying to win.
Rob?
Well, it's always about looking for the smart way to manage a campaign with individual small donations. That's what I've been doing. I'm not going to be able to employ people the day of the election at the rate of bringing in many people to knock on doors. But we have been knocking on doors with different volunteers over the months, and I think that yes, there is the opportunity of having transparency and making sure that we don't go into vote buy-in, but that's for the courts to decide what campaigns are doing that and which ones are not. And I do believe that we need to take the opportunities always to reach out to the housing authority residents. I do believe that the pledge included that we could do it if we know somebody in the building and it's more of an introduction. So that's what I did in the past few months.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Another thing that they brought up, this Dabalik campaign that is that they have said that if they get the majority on the council, they would want to put a referendum question in 2020 that would say that both the mayor and the city council members only get 2 terms, of course 8 years of service. So I imagine you guys might have some opinions on that, and we'll start with Ron.
I do think that there is a benefit, and I'm sure the councilman would agree with me, on being in council for 15 years. I do believe in the need for term limits, not just for the councilman, but also for myself when I become elected. I do think that having a diversity of voices in the council represent us. It's important for democracy, and I'm looking forward to be part of the conversation next year.
Okay.
Contrary to most people's belief, I actually support term limits wholeheartedly. I think the reality is that you should be able to serve well and then have somebody have the opportunity to serve in that place. Now, I look at it from a very different perspective. Term limits would be consecutive terms. So if you serve for 2 terms and then you're not elected, or you move your position from, let's say, a ward position to an at-large position, that I think is something very different. And I think that would be the way we should implement term limits in the city of Hoboken, because if someone's doing a job, whether it's 2 years or 10 years, and they're doing it well, they're elected, those people that elected that person would want them to stay. So term limits a little different than most people would view it, but I would probably push for consecutive term limits in the same position.
Got it. All right. Now let's circle back a little bit to talking about fiscal responsibility. Now I know we spoke about this at Stevens last week, but I think you guys had really interesting differing opinions and want to get some new eyes and ears on that. So with that said, every year, Hoboken's budget's usually about something like $115 to $125 million. And as a representative, a steward of the Third Ward, how would you guys help to keep taxes stable? Or, what do you think would be the best fiscal approach to make sure that your constituents are not feeling it hitting their pockets, let's put it that way? And we'll start with Councilman.
Sure, and I said this at our last debate. The reality is you hear from not only my opponent, but many other people about keeping taxes stable in the city of Hoboken. And the reality is I don't want to do that. I want to lower our taxes in the city of Hoboken. I want to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to put dollars back in our residents' pockets. We're asking not only for a tax increase this year, we're asking for an increase in an assessment for a special improvement district. We're potentially going to, we do have on the ballot a question to increase our open space trust fund. These are all additional dollar amounts that are going to be burdened for the taxpayer. So I want to reduce taxes as much as possible. I want to make sure we do that year over year, and I want to make sure we don't only do that in the city of Hoboken, but we put pressure on the county of Hudson, and we put pressure on the school board to make sure they're doing their job and trying to reduce the taxes on that side as well.
Rob?
Yes, again, I mentioned that also in the other debate. The councilman has had 15 years to do something like that, and he hasn't. I do believe that's when the activism comes in place as well. It's about pushing the agenda so that we have other sources of revenue as well. Yes, I do believe that we have to hold the line on taxes and then increase the number of services that we provide to the community, improve this, the efficiency also in different services and instances. For example, the Park Mobile app, making sure that this includes also garages, both public and private, so that way you use our resources more efficiently, and also help out with our traffic as well in the city of Hoboken. And that's just a way to not reinvent the wheel and expand our services. I did ask it to incorporate, for example, to look into our assets, and we have, for example, Pier A, which would be a great asset for a venue for different events, for different concerts, and just how other venues generate funds through that. That's how we can also generate funds as a city.
So just quickly to add, again, you heard I want to hold the line on taxes. We didn't hear anything about decreasing taxes in the city of Hoboken. And in the same breath, we talked about increasing services, and with absolutely no plan on how to pay for that. The reality is that over my course of serving the city of Hoboken, I have been one vote. And I consistently and will consistently vote for any vote against any tax increase in the city of Hoboken.
Yeah, and that's an issue when there are proposals of having a community land trust, when there are proposals of providing more services, like my opponent has been saying, for us to think that we're not going to generate new services. That's not a good statement. That's not a good idea. I think that we have to think of creatively on how do we incorporate new sources of revenue, so that way we can expand our services, because there are people that are hurting and that are having trouble in Hoboken, and we have to address that.
But quickly, you can't just use the soundbite. You can't just say we're going to create new sources of revenue and have no real plan to do that. How do you want to do that? Do you want to increase development in the city of Hoboken? Do you want to change services? Do you want to decrease the number of directors? What do you want to do? The reality is, every year when the budget comes up, we speak about it, and I put forth proposals to actually make those changes so that we can reduce the taxes in the city of Hoboken. No one knows where you stand when it comes to fiscal responsibility in the city of Hoboken.
And I already mentioned a way that we can increase our revenues, which was utilizing our assets.
What assets?
I just mentioned the assets that,
Which one?
like our public space, like the PRA, for example, that we can generate funding because we haven't used it. We had a concert maybe 5 years ago, and we haven't done one ever since. So developing that, those ideas, bringing in other partners so that we can develop those. That is fiscal responsibility, is having us bringing up solutions, not just cutting, and instead generate new ideas of how to generate those funds.
The last administration bonded for over $100 million. Making $50,000 on a concert in PRA Park is not going to cut it. We keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and we have no means to pay that bill back. We need to make some drastic changes, and we need to do that now so that we save the taxpayer money.
All right, last one on this topic.
I'm okay.
Okay, good. So let's once again try something different here. So you guys know there's a special improvement district coming to the city of Hoboken, so fairly open-ended for you. What do you plan on doing if elected to help out those Third Ward residents and, of course, the business owners that would like to benefit from this new endeavor in the city? We'll start with Ron this time.
Yes, I believe that we have to see the Special Improvement District provide services to the people who are also paying for this Special Improvement District. Somebody, a property owner has said, what are they going to do? Are they going to shovel my block from the snow? And I said, that's an idea. That's something that we can incorporate so that the SID, the Special Improvement District, once it becomes a reality, that they do that, especially clearing the corners, which has been a big issue, not just for the residents overall, but people with disabilities that have had those issues when coming into crossing our streets during a snowstorm.
I'm 100% against the SID as it currently stands for residents of the Third Ward. Now, having said that, I do support SIDs, but they have to be specific. Actually, the law states that everyone has to have a benefit who participates in funding that SID. The reality is the homeowner in the Third Ward is not going to reap the benefit of any direct funding from the SID. Therefore, they should not be included in that. My opponent got up at a council meeting and talked about his advocacy for the Third Ward to be included in that, the whole city to be included in that, as a matter of fact. The reality is that if we want to do a SID, we should do it correctly. We should incorporate the SID so that it's specific to businesses in the city of Hoboken and not necessarily homeowners as well.
Yes, so I do believe that the SID is an important part to making sure that Hoboken stays attractive, especially in the Third Ward. This same property owner was saying, yes, it's getting a bit tougher for me because I don't have a brand new unit to rent out to attract people to come and live here because of that competition that there is. So developing the SID and those activities that happen in our streets through the SID will be an important aspect of it. But there's also this thing about the SID is that it hasn't even been incorporated, it hasn't been developed, there's no executive director yet that can develop those proposals. That's what happens after you develop the SID, is making sure that everybody's voice is included, making sure that the services are there for everybody that's paying into it so that we can have a better Third Ward and a better Hoboken.
Okay, very good. So let's go on to public safety. So when we're talking about our Hoboken police, our Hoboken firefighters, what do you guys think needs to change, if anything, regarding the way that the police are deployed, the way that response times are issued? Of course, the EMS services, I should mention as well. But just when we're looking at public safety as a whole in the Third Ward and perhaps throughout the city, what do you think about hiring practices, overtime, deployment? Do you think anything needs to change, and why or why not? Then we'll start with Councilman.
Yeah, so first let me say I think our emergency responders, our police, fire, and ambulance are all amazing in the city of Hoboken. They actually work with less to make sure that the service is superb. Personally, I think that we need to increase our manpower. We have an issue with overtime in the fire department, for example. So we're actually spending more money just to make sure that we're staffed well, when in fact if we did hire we could save some of that overtime money. I think the same thing goes on in the police department. But again, goes back to both of our chiefs. I think they're amazing in the way that they handle their departments. They work with everything that they have. They make sure that they do their job to the utmost degree. And I can't thank them enough for their service. In addition, the ambulance corps is a little different, right? It's a volunteer ambulance corps in the city of Hoboken. We as a city try to supplement them as much as possible so that they can continue to do the job that they do. We're growing in numbers as far as the population in the city of Hoboken, so we do have some outside help from different ambulance services. We'll continue to need to do that if we can't, in fact, increase our ambulance service in the city.
All right.
I mean, we've always maintained good relationships with the councilman, always staying positive and on policy, and this is something that we agree on. The chiefs, both the police and fire, have been doing an amazing job. I do want to give a shout out to Police Officer Arben. He actually is part of the police officers that are on bike, that go on bicycles, that go throughout the city, especially checking out the different parks, making sure that everybody's safe. And something that in my discussion with him and a community dinner, something that came up was that they need to get between different parks in a fast way. And something I propose is like something that would be a lot more affordable and that would not hit traffic would be having those e-bikes, pedal assist bikes for this unit. And he loved the idea, so I'm looking forward to seeing how the city can help out with that.
What do you think about the possibility of those e-units being deployed in 2020 and beyond, Councilman?
Oh, I have no problem with them. I think it's actually a pretty good idea. You know, we want to make sure that we have every asset that we possibly can to make the job as easy and efficient as possible in the city of Hoboken. So I would not be opposed to it at all.
Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about something not Third Ward specific, but I mean, I think it's something that has been lost in the shuffle with everything going on with these, of course, very important elections. Now, Hoboken Hotel. Now, you guys know that it looked like at the end of last year into this beginning of this year, it looked like everything was settled. You know, it looked like the developer was happy, the city was happy. There was going to be millions of dollars in givebacks, but then the judge said it would create unacceptable possibilities for abuse and fraud. And, you know, it's back to the drawing board, and we're still working on it across all cylinders, I guess we could say. So what do you guys think is the solution to make sure that this hotel plan happens, and what kind of input could you provide from the Third Ward? So, Councilman?
Yeah, so the situation was exactly what you stated. The reality is that I think it's always prudent to make sure anything that's being proposed in a certain area of the city, any of those givebacks actually protect and preserve what's happening in and around that community. So those givebacks, changing them slightly to really encompass areas in the First Ward where the hotel is being proposed is actually something that I think we should do. So whatever that may be, increased police presence, changing roadways and resurfacing roadways, making sure our infrastructure is updated. All those things pertaining to that area probably make the most sense. So I don't think it's a bad thing that it happened. I think it's a learning experience for the city, and I think it's something that we should always look at in projects that are coming in the future.
Okay, Ron?
Yes, I believe that it is net positive for the community. Talking about venues, that's something that can really attract life to that area as well during the daytime, and also bringing conferences and different initiatives to the Hoboken as well. I do believe that we, as the councilman said, it was a learning experience. It's something that with the givebacks, with the infrastructure needs for that community in that specific area, we have a way to move forward for this project, and I'm looking forward to it.
Just one point to add, I think if the development was a different development, it wasn't a hotel, if it was a residential development, for example, I think some of those givebacks would have been appropriate, especially when it came to funding our students. Right, so if it's a residential building and we know we're going to have an increase in population, we know we're going to have families there, I think that's something that might have worked. But because it was a hotel, I don't think it was probably the best choice for those givebacks, and the judge agreed.
Okay, so on another timely issue, of course, as it pertains to November 5th, you guys are well aware that there's two ballot questions about the Open Space Preservation Fund. And if approved, this would probably help connect the waterfront and probably finish that park that people have been hoping for years by Union Dry Dock. So what do you guys think about the open space questions? Can you tell us whether you'll be voting yes or no on those two questions on November 5th? And Rob?
Yeah, we'll be voting yes on both questions. I do believe that we have a unique opportunity to connect our waterfront that's not seen anywhere in our area. It's something that also, through these questions, we'll be able to reallocate the funding so that the funding would be not just for purchasing open space, but also for maintenance and development as well. So I'm supportive of both.
Yeah, I agree. I'm supportive of both as well. The reality is when this first started, when we decided we were going to have this assessment for open space, we argued the fact, should we include maintenance? And the reality is then those who pushed the initiative decided that they didn't want to include maintenance. So we come full circle now, and we realize that after we build these parks, we have to maintain them, and we have to build them out. So we want to be able to use that funding to do that. So now that initiative is now on the ballot again, and I will be supporting it. But it's something that I think we have to be cautious about, because as I mentioned earlier, the prior administration put us into $100 million worth of debt. And the proper use of this funding is to really bond against the money that's allocated in the fund itself. So we could fall into a trap where we're bonding a lot of money for open space or maintenance of open space or building out of open space. So it's just something I always caution, because I think we're going down the road where we're putting a lot on the credit card, and we really need to make sure that we're able to pay that off.
So let's talk a little bit about that, right? So if elected, could you give us one example of what you think would be responsible bonding over the next 4 years, perhaps beyond? And could you give us an example of what irresponsible bonding would look like and why that's bad for Hoboken? And we'll start with Ron.
Yes, I believe that with bonding, the idea should be on how we're going to generate the funds in order to pay off that bond. So I agree with the councilman that we do have to be smart about the bonding, that we have to generate the funds and the revenue in order to make sure that that's sustainable over time, because or else we're going to get stuck with the bill later on.
Yes, I'll use an example. So prior administration at times used short-term notes to acquire vehicles for a police department or a director or a different division in the city of Hoboken. We took those short-term notes and we then paid that off over time. But instead of finalizing that note at its end date, what we did was we took that and we rolled that over into a long-term bond. So now we're actually paying even more associated with it. So that's what I'm talking about being irresponsible when we're talking about bonding. Things that are responsible for bonding is something like our infrastructure, bonding for our sewer systems or our water mains, right? Those are things that we should bond for. We want to make sure that we have the ability to protect our residents and make sure that those services are absolutely in place for them.
So on that note, Councilman, you guys, of course, both know that this year there's that new deal with Suez, and pretty much it seemed like everybody in the mayor's office and beyond thought this was a great deal. So I just wanted to, first of all, do you think that this was the best deal possible? Just a yes or no on that. And then could you explain what this will mean for the residents across the city and, of course, the Third Ward? And we'll start with you.
So in short, yes. I'm, again, always fearful that when we look at a new deal like this, there are always some hidden obstacles, and what does that look like over time? So I'm absolutely happy with the deal, but I am also very skeptical, and I want to make sure that the deal is exactly what it was when we all sat at the table to finalize that deal. What does it mean for the city? Well, it means that our water system now is back in the hands of the city. We don't have a secondary party making all those decisions. The city actually has the ability to make the final decisions when it comes to our water system. And we will be able to then set the rates. We will then be able to make the changes needed, and we will then be able to make whatever upgrades we choose are necessary.
Okay, Rob?
Yeah, I think that we have to keep an eye out on this, make sure that Suez is delivering what we have agreed on as a city. And it seems like it's a deal that will help address the different issues that we've had with our water infrastructure in town, something that has been a pressing matter in the past, especially in the past few years. I agree with the councilman again. That's pretty good.
Yeah, you're on a roll. You guys are on a hot hand. So let's let's circle back to the e-scooter thing just for a quick second because, I wanted to get your take. What do you think about the city's new initiative here with micro-mobility enforcement officers? I believe that was the official term. There's now 2 of them employed by the city of Hoboken. Do you think this is a step in the right direction, yes or no? Ron?
I think it helps with enforcement so that the police doesn't have to implement too much of the resources into this matter. However, we do need to both incorporate technology so that make sure that Lime is overseeing that people are following the rules. But also, it's about building that infrastructure in our streets so that, for example, something that has been proven to get riders off the sidewalks is to have protected bike lanes, and so it's connected both through the engineering in order to prevent this type of behaviors, but then it's also that enforcement which the 2 micromobility officers would help as well.
Yes, I think it is a step in the right direction. However, what I'm fearful of is the authority that they hold. So when a police officer stops somebody on a scooter, they have the authority to issue a summons. They have the authority to issue a Title 39 summons. Micromobility officer doesn't necessarily have that authority. And what we as a city need to do is make sure that they have all the authority possible. So what does that mean? Do we continue down the road of a micromobility officer, which does not have the police powers that a police officer does? Or do we implement a different division in the police department that has exactly that? Now, with something like that comes an added cost. So it's something that needs to be looked at. But the reality is I'm an advocate for increasing our police department and our fire department for that matter. So I would love to explore that.
All right, very good. So we mentioned also briefly at the beginning about the recent Halloween pub crawl. It was hundreds of calls for service, a few arrests. I think 15 were transported to the hospital. So obviously, the Third Ward isn't the most robust bar scene out of the city, but is this something that is on your radar? What would you guys recommend or hope to do if elected as it comes to those holiday-themed pub crawls in Hoboken? We'll start with you, Councilman.
Yeah, it's been an issue in the city of Hoboken. We've had those different holidays, and it seems like every year there's an added holiday. But it's been a major issue, right? So as you stated, the Third Ward is not necessarily on any given weekend the most populated from that bar scene. But on these specific days, it runs throughout the city. They go from bar to bar, walk through our streets, and they're not always, those individuals are not always cognizant of the neighbors in the ward. So what do? How do we change it? One, I think if we're going to do things like that or allow things like that, we actually take ownership of it. We allow our business community to actually take ownership of that and actually run the event. Once they run the event, right, we could corral the event, potentially on PRA. Maybe do something like that. But I think there's a way to take what we have that is not changing, right? How do we make it work for the city of Hoboken? And in doing that, how do we protect our businesses in the city of Hoboken? Because on events like that, not only do those individuals get summoned, but potentially the bar owners get summoned. So how do we then protect those businesses in the city of Hoboken to make sure that they continue to operate in our city while keeping all of our residents safe in the city?
Yeah, so one of the people I spoke to recently was the manager from Cal, and something that he told me was, we don't really make much money, and we don't want the trouble of having events like this in Hoboken, and in their bar in particular. So I think there's a lot of negative aspects that happen to our businesses because of that, besides the negative aspects to our residents. I do believe that, for example, when there's events in Hoboken in our streets, there's a requirement to have a certain amount of police officers that will be securing that area, and then the organizers are the ones that put up that fee. So I think that doing something like that, I do like the idea of corralling the event, maybe within Washington Street in a very specific area. So that will be, and I do believe that the chief of police had mentioned by focusing and concentrating on a specific area near the PATH train, it's easier to manage that, for example, when it used to happen before, which was all over the city, and it's a lot harder to have the response times as well.
Just one quick point, so everyone understands it. I think it's straight from the Attorney General in New Jersey. They do not allow off-duty police officers to actually work in or for the bars during those types of events. And again, I could be wrong. It may actually be a local thing, but I know the chief is not in favor of it, and I think there's issues with the state allowing it as well. But if it in fact is an event, and it's moved to a certain area, I think then we can do something like that. So again, it's something that we need to look at, but something has to change.
And also, it's not so much as police officers being off duty and serving as security. It's like the actual police department when they bring permits in and want to have an event on the street, for example, that happens. So just to clarify.
Okay, so of course we all know that this election cycle there's been countless press releases and interviews and other fodder, I guess we'll call it, regarding pay to play. So when it comes to the city's pay to play laws, that ordinance that was of course approved in 2011, where do you guys stand? And I mean, what do you believe about the enforceability and what changes need to be made, if any? And we'll start with Rob.
Yeah, I think that we have to follow the money, and depending on where the money comes from the donations of a campaign, we're able to see how much influence people like contractors have. I am not taking money from developers. I think they have a good industry, but I do feel that as a councilman, if elected, I wouldn't want to have any type of conflict of interest with any vendors or any developers where we would be making any decisions on in the city. So that's why I've decided to keep my donations as individual donations and making sure that it's not too robust of donations from each person as well.
Yeah, so as the councilman, I've voted for every anti-pay-to-play law that's been proposed in the city of Hoboken. I will continue to do so, and I have adhered to every one of those laws that have been put in place, and will continue to do so as well. The reality is that the world has changed drastically when it comes to dollars in elections. So there needs to be a comprehensive look at how we fund our elections. Is it public funding? Is that the answer? I don't know. I really don't know. But I think something does need to change, because once the Supreme Court issued their ruling that these independent expenditures could come into play, there's millions of dollars that are at play on national levels and thousands of dollars all the way down to the local level. So it's something that needs to be looked at, and something that needs to be looked at really hard and fast.
So just on that point, let's talk about the outside money. A lot of people call it dark money. There's at least one PAC, I believe a second one actually just did an ad today in these elections. I mean, not in the third ward, but I mean, you guys have seen the NJ community initiatives and Stronger Foundations have gotten, involved in this race. And I mean, just what's your take on that? And what do you think it says about the direction of the Hoboken elections in the future? Councilman?
Yeah, as I said, I think it was the unintended consequence of such a push for the anti-pay-to-play laws, both locally and on a grand scale. I think that money has now become a factor in all elections, whether it's local or national. So we have to look at that again. And I don't know how we put that genie back in the bottle now that the Supreme Court has ruled. So that money, those independent expenditures and all that money, whether you call it dark money or PAC money or IE money, whatever you may term it as, I think it's here, and I think we need to find a way to combat that somehow. And I don't honestly have the answer, but we do need to look at it.
I think getting involved in our national politics helps as well. I do think that with the court ruling, in favor of this type of PAC money and dark money coming into our politics, it's a huge issue. I do think that also building movements from the ground up through volunteers and also making sure that we do politics in a different way. People notice. People notice when when somebody's using a super PAC. People notice when the money is pouring in from dark places, and they also notice when a candidate is true to their values. So that's one contrast. Then at the national level, we do have to solve this issue.
All right, so a fun one for you guys, but an easy fun one. So out of everything that's trending right now, something that you would like that's trending in the third ward right now, what is it, and how would you help continue that in the next 4 years if elected on November 5th? Rob?
So you said something that's trending in our
Like,
ward?
yeah, like for example, something that has been going on that is in the third ward that you really like, and how would you help continue, or something you would like to start, how would you help get that off the ground, or how would you continue that if you get 4 years on the council?
I would like to get the local businesses more involved, more interconnected as well, so that there could be more initiatives. For example, there are some block parties that have happened in the ward this past year, and I think that expanding those helps, because that way we make a more closely knit community, making sure that we support our local businesses like our local coffee shops, making sure that we have our meetups there. I love the meetups that happen with the police department and the chief, which is Coffee with a Cop. I would like to see them be more often, and also with different government officials. So it's not just with the police department, but with others as well, because those type of settings, instead of having to come into a city council meeting and speak up in front of a crowd and in front of all the council members, this type of setting helps into building more engagement and also get the feedback that we need in order to do our jobs better.
Something that I think is really trending in the ward is open space. Like I said, this past year we were able to renovate Madison Street Park. It's our premier splash park in the city of Hoboken, used by thousands of children. We have now a new park on Jackson Street, which includes a public gym, which includes a lawn space, which includes a park area, a public plaza. All these things are really trending, and we want to continue that. And we want to incorporate that into some of the traditional values and traditional celebrations that we have. For example, St. Anne's Feast. St. Anne's Feast is just a few blocks away. Instead of situating the feast as it has been historically, why not utilize that space that is now new to the ward? Why not utilize the lawn space and the public plaza and the park space? Instead of going one direction, all we need to do is maybe trend and change the direction and utilize all that new space. And I think the residents have welcomed it, and I think they love their new addition to the ward.
So something I would like to point out in terms of St. Anne's Festival, something I noticed this year is that there was no Latin night. Like, that's something that was very popular with the community. It brought everybody together as well. I do think that an institution like the Special Improvement District could help make sure that these type of traditions are expanded and strengthened as well, because it is something that helps out the community overall and the local business community. In terms of the parks, I think it's great that we have new parks. We do have to work more on pedestrian safety. For example, on 3rd and Madison, adding a stop sign is not enough. We need to have also the bump outs as well. Thanks.
Yeah, just quickly, it's not just adding a stop sign there. We actually added a two-way stop sign there, and one's lit. We've had pedestrian safety measures implemented there, so we're taking that very serious, not only at that park, but the new park on Jackson Street and throughout the ward.
All right, gentlemen, thanks so much for giving us your time. 1 week out from the election, much appreciated, and every minute counts. We really appreciate this hour. We'll give you now your time to close. Councilman, you can start off.
Yeah, thank you again. I appreciate it. It was a great day. Always fun to spend some time with Ron. I think my campaign slogan says it all. Promises made, promises kept. Vote Russo 1C, November 5th. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've been living in Hoboken for a while now, and I do have skin in the game, just like the councilman here as well. I have a 1-year-old daughter. I would like her to grow up in a city that does welcome all ages and abilities, that addresses these issues, and we don't have that much time also to address these issues. With the floodings, with the heat waves as well, it's something that we have to tackle strongly. We need to have 100% renewable transportation, energy transportation in the city, electrify our fleet for the hop, implement protected bike lanes, making sure that pedestrian safety is implemented with a priority, and that activism from the community and from the parents is going to help with that. I do see, I'm worried about our senior citizens. I've been speaking with them, and they're spending 80% of their income from their retirement into just their rent, and that's something that we have to address, and that's why I'm pushing for the community land trust for the past 2 years. So vote Bautista for City Council for the 3rd Ward. Thanks.
Thanks again, guys. I'm sure we'll be talking before November 5th. Best of luck.
Thank you.
you.